marketplace works. Second, we don't think just because you're non-fundamentalist, Saudi Arabia is not willing to engage with trade with you, right? There's always a quid pro quo arrangement. Like obviously they sell oil to you, they'll get something in return. For example, a lot of the domestic workers in Saudi Arabia are Filipino. The Philippines is a majority Catholic country. So we don't necessarily think that Saudi Arabia is discouraged from engaging in trade with you just because you don't so happen to be fundamentally Muslim. Second, they said that, look guys, we can't set up banking systems. That's really bad because then people won't be able to get interest rates that won't be able to engage in these banking systems. These banking systems already exist in Southeast Asia within these kinds of countries. Muslim people of a particular religion can engage in business that's identical to their religion. That happens only when we live in a state that respects other religions as well. So obviously Malaysia, because it's ruled by a majority Malay Muslim majority, of course those people can run their own styles of businesses. What about people who want to charge interest and all those things? Obviously majority can get what majority wants, but what about the minorities? They never ensured us a place where that can legitimately happen. Second, they said that Islamophobia is a problem. But yeah, the thing here is that Saudi Arabia just panders to the right-wing bigotry of Islamophobia. Why? Because if you live in a country, if you're a Westerner or a person with that kind of mentality, which they seem to have, right? So what happens is that when you enter Malaysia and you see that women are forced to wear the hijab, and you're a person of that orientation, you think that that's a massive infringement of human rights. And when you see that the Chinese and Indian minorities are being oppressed, that's exactly what these bigots are going to say. Look at the Muslim, it's a religion of war and hatred. But in fact, that's just supposed, it's not. It's a religion where you're not supposed to do these things. But fundamentalism obviously puts a blanket statement upon Islamic people in general. We think that geopolitically speaking, it doesn't really matter whether you're a fundamentalist Islamic country or a modern Islamic country. You don't really get any net benefits. But what do you get? What net benefits do you gain then, right? It's my second issue, how Arabization leads to a discrepancy between democracy and human rights. Because they want collectivization. We told you collectivization can't happen through your framework. Why so? And they actually agreed when they said that Turkey is actually a really good idea of a Muslim state. Oh well, yeah, that's what we said from the very beginning. Why is that so? Because when you live in a framework where the constitution is not secular, what's able to happen is that people are guaranteed rights. The problem is that when you go through an Arab style, instead of you replace the constitution, which guarantees your rights, with the Quran and various other religious doctrine. That's particularly bad when you talk about Southeast Asia. And this is what they don't understand. Southeast Asia, particularly in the context of Malaysia and Indonesia, has 3 races with 3 different religions. What are these religions? There's Hindu, and then the Chinese have various other religions, and you have the majority Malay Muslim population. So here's the thing. So when politics is governed by Malay for Malaysia, because we're a particular ethnic group, that ethnic group is inextricably tied in politics with the religion. How does that manifest itself in actual policy? That can never lead to collectivization. So we never actually heard what collectivization means to them, but I presume it means to like a better world, right? Like where people generally get along. So how do people generally get along? When they're able to practice their religion without persecution. When they're able to criticize the government, which is now banned because governance is tied with the word of God. When we can't have room for dissent, and I can't practice things that I would have otherwise normally have practiced in a different place. This is particularly worrisome because we live in a country where there are 3 unique kinds of people with different kinds of culture. Does that mean that they can never get along? No. And they agreed with us when they said that, look at Turkey, you have a lot of Orthodox Christians and a lot of Coptic Christians within a majority predominant Muslim country. Can they coexist? They never gave us any reason why that was a bad model, which is what we've been proposing from the very beginning. Okay, what else? They said, we argued to you that many times, the problem here is that not only is it bad for human rights situations of other people, but it's also bad for education, coming by my first speaker. When modern madrasas are given most of their literature from very conservative Hanafi states like Saudi Arabia, the problem is that people are never able to gain their own self-identity. Why? Because they're getting the identity of other countries. So how can people develop their own sort of like opting into identity of what it is to be Muslim in Southeast Asia if they're indoctrinated by another country? I think that's particularly painful because then we're talking about young children whose minds are very malleable. So they come up with this very fundamentalist thinking without ever having the idea of, without having the option of opting out of that identity to begin with. So that's particularly painful because then the Malaysian people are actually trying to live in the shell of a Saudi Arabian identity. Third, we told you that what happens here is that it leads to more extreme politics by creating in-groups and out-groups because there's no room for dissent. Chinese people are mad, Indian people are mad, go to hell. That's the kind of politics we get when religion dominates the discourse. Why? Because you don't see them as Malaysian anymore. You see them as different people. You're Chinese, and you belong to a particular ethnic group. We don't think your ethnic group ties you to a particular country. That's just a social construct. But in terms of creating collectivization, it's when how are you able to move across from that conversation? It's when we use moderate secular frameworks as a basis for discussion. Meaning, how do we improve the economy? How do we create more jobs? Those things never happen if the jobs are only meant for Malay people. The jobs in the generation of such welfare is only meant for Malay people who are Muslim, who are the more important people. That's why the Bumi Putra privileges were created. Last, we told you that for example, in the case of the Philippines, even when you're a minority group in Southeast Asia, once you align yourself with more extreme countries, what happens is that you become a lightning rod for discrimination. Why? Because then you become a part of that Islamophobia which they're afraid. Now when you come to the Bangsamoro bill in the Philippines, you can't get these bills passed because you align yourself with more violent, more fundamentalist groups. So overall, we think in Southeast Asia, if you look at how it operates, we think to have that very same collectivization that they want, they need to look past their religion and look at the fact that Malaysia is for Malaysia, not just for the Malay. Thank you.
I think they're F, and they know what it's put in it, whose preferred pronoun is she or they.
Madam Speaker, let's clear a few things up in this debate because I think this debate is desperately needing some clarity. So, later in this speech, I'm going to unpack what Arabization actually looks like, why we on the negative believe that it overall leads to a better type of Islam in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, why it leads to a better kind of global society, and why it actually minimizes all of the harms the affirmative wanted to constantly bring up. So, 3 issues in this debate. Firstly, again, what does Arabization actually look like in this context? Secondly, what is better for Islam in the region with a particular focus on Southeast Asia? And finally, what is our overall endgame and what do we think contributes to a better and more cohesive world in the long term? Now let's have a look at what Arabization actually looks like, because the way it was conceptualized from the affirmative was this almost Daesh-style caliphate building force trying to take over the entirety of the Middle East and Southeast Asia. We tell you that Arabization doesn't exclude reform and progress, and in fact we think it actually complements reform and progress because it brings together and empowers moderates who have more sway over a greater area. We also think that it doesn't have to necessitate a caliphate or doesn't have to necessitate listening to the gospel truth of Saudi Arabia. We think it entails having increased interaction with people who have shared beliefs in a region where those beliefs have significant power. We think it entails actually being able to have discussions of religious sectarian division and trying to overcome these together to form a more unified front. We think it's incredibly powerful to overcome issues such as Sunni and Shia divisions across the region. And we think it's actually really important when you have this kind of discourse going on that you actually see increased liberalism and increased understanding and cultural empathy. We actually think, Madam Speaker, that when you take individuals that have a shared belief in shared beliefs that are universal, that do transcend borders, and you come together and try and figure out a way to make those shared beliefs expand, you actually end up resolving a lot of the conflicts and a lot of the tensions in that religion. I will be expanding on this a little bit later, talking about how we combat fundamentalism and radicalization. However, I just wanted to clear up that we are not proposing some sort of caliphate to take over the Middle East. We are proposing a system. We support the continued unification, the continued discussion, and the continued progress in sharing beliefs and creating a more unified Islam. Now, onto what is actually better for Islam in the region. I'm going to look at Southeast Asia first, because obviously this is one of the biggest stakeholders in the debate. Now, we were told that Southeast Asian Muslims were massively disadvantaged through Arabization for a number of things. Firstly, it increased fundamentalism and extremism and was harmful to liberal thought and freedom. Secondly, it created more exclusivity along ethnic lines in a region that already faced the legacy of these in the past. We told you that to have political backlash and made conflict through state identity and religion. Here are responses. Firstly, and most importantly, in fundamentalism, because we think this transcends a lot of the issues in debate. We actually, flagged in my opening point, actually think that increased unification increases the strength of the moderate bloc. We would tell you that because the driving force of religion is oftentimes the majority force, which we would say, in this case, is the moderates. We would tell you that that like the characterization of the Middle East that they were presented with in the ad was fundamentally flawed and didn't take into account the growing strength of liberalism, as seen, through like the Arab Spring, which admittedly was a failure, did demonstrate there is a massive incentive for overhaul and change, and there is a massive strength of the moderates in the region that want to see increased liberty and an increased ability to freely discuss their religions and come to agreement on what it means to be Muslim. I would also tell you that when you form unified blocks, you were able to better combat the growing threat of radicalization. And we thought this threat was completely dismissed by the affirmative, because the fact is, across India, across the Middle East, going into Pakistan, infiltrating through Southeast Asia, is the growing threat of radicalization. We've seen it with Al-Qaeda in Pakistan again. We've seen it with ISIS trying to take footholds in India. We think this is one of the biggest threats to the region, and we think that this threat is best combated when you actually unify and as a group can come up with holistic representative and cohesive policy in order to deal with these threats within the religion that threaten to destabilize it and create negative perceptions in the rest of the world. So that's we tell you that in fact fundamentalism and radicalization are not necessarily increased by Arabization. We tell you in fact it provides a better forum to combat these. Whereas previously you have two groups that feel diametrically opposite and feel defined by their identity, not by their shared beliefs, and are unable to come to consensus and unable to come to a shared stance. Next, on this idea of exclusively on ethnic lines. Now, firstly, we would tell you that Middle Eastern Muslims have often faced extreme oppression and isolation. We point to India, where riots against Muslims have left thousands of dead, and oftentimes have led to a growing feeling of isolation within the area and oppression and marginalization within the area. We think, as we told you at first, it's incredibly powerful for these groups to feel that they are connected to something larger, to feel like they have the strength and empowerment from a larger religious force behind them, to feel like they are part of a group and not just a marginalized, unwanted sect of their community. We think in this way that sometimes national identity isn't quite as important as your religious identity, because you choose your religion oftentimes when you're able to question your religion, you're never able to choose where you're born. We think the fact that you can actually choose to identify with something you really believe in is incredibly important for your feeling of empowerment, for your feeling of actualization. However, moreover on this point of exclusivity, we still didn't see why it was necessary that exclusivity happened when you increase the collectivism you had and increase the discussion you had with other members of your religion. In fact, we think this actually makes it better because, as everybody said, it does decrease the attempts of radicalization. We think that you actually get benefits as well from the broader region, as we told you at second, through increased economic benefits. I'll be expanding on it in a bit. But we think that you actually do have the potential to really unify religion when you start a process of unity and you start a process of collecting moderate people and getting them to discuss and shape behavior. Now, we've very often this issue of national religious identity. As a brief, we thought religious identity in many cases was more important because you actually chose that, and that was the most distinguishing feature about you in when you were in your ethnic bloc, and that is what caused exclusivity. But we would tell you as well that we still don't believe that necessarily choosing your religious identity and choosing to identify with one aspect of that meant you automatically usurped and automatically disowned all your ethnic identity. We thought that would create a very happy medium where those influences could play a big role in how you identify yourself. We just didn't have a reason enough to regret wanting to have a stronger identification with your religion as well. Alright, so more broadly on this idea of why it's benefits the region in total, we told you it did increase diplomatic ties within countries. I mean, that's incredibly important in a region that has been racked by terror and violence and fear for too long, Madam Speaker. We tell you that when you increase, the way that states work is that oftentimes constructive philosophies will apply, whereby states are more likely to engage with each other if they there are shared identities that do transcend borders. That you are more likely to get global policies in these areas and actually transcend the religious cooperation to a government level. We thought that's incredibly important. And this is my final point, which is why we think it's so important for this end game. Now, the end game that they want to paint for us with the house is global caliphate. We would completely reject that. We think that was an unfair burden to place on our side of the house. We told you that our perception of the end game was a Southeast Asia and a Middle East that had increased links between them, that had increased shared identity, where the essential tenets of Islam could be challenged and could be discussed openly by moderate groups. We told you this is a region where moderates in the Middle East were empowered by the support of the moderates in Southeast Asia, and where marginalized groups in Southeast Asia were empowered by the force of the Middle East. We thought that's a good harmony. We from the outside, they didn't suggest, but from their side, Without Arabization, we see a far more fractured and divisive society, one that is incapable of dealing with global problems and with engaging in global solutions. Because ultimately, when we are dealing with religions that transcend millions of people, when we are dealing with regions that face broadly similar issues across the board, we need to have unity. That is why Arabization is so important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ferdinand. And in cases are negative, I'd invite you to
By the end of this debate, the affirmative team would have to have done two things to win this. Firstly, they would have to establish what Arabization could actually do, not only internally but externally in the global community. But moreover, secondly, they had to explain why this would be unable to empower the moderate voices and therefore was something that we would regret in the global community. So I'm going to be doing two things in this debate. Firstly, in this speech. Firstly, whether or not Arabization should be regrettable. And secondly, what are the harms in collectivization in the global community. On this first idea of whether or not Arabization was regrettable. We told, from the negative, we told you a clear framework for whether or not we would regret something in the global community. We told you firstly that it brought about benefits to the individual and established that there was an ability to heighten your faith if you were collectivizing on common cultural barriers between people in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Secondly, that when it brought significant benefits to those countries internally, and their ability to collectivise under those common goals was an ability to heighten their actions and behaviours within states. We thought that was really powerful rhetoric given by the negative team, and we saw no response by the affirmative team in regards to whether or not something could be regretted under that framework. What did we hear in response? We heard two things. Firstly, that the system would, Arabization creates a caliphate, which we heard from second. But then further from that, from third, we heard that the alternatives like Saudi Arabia would govern your country in the future. We told you that firstly, neither of those things would happen. We heard this right down the bench, that the reality was that it wasn't an issue of whether or not extremism would implant themselves into those countries, but rather the power of moderate voices to create a real bloc and community within those regions. It was well established by the negative team that there was some significance of religion on the individual, that it was moreover a choice as opposed to something that was given to you at birth. Their world never extended beyond the worst case scenario that Saudi Arabia and extreme countries would control the power brokes in the Southeast community. Our system provided a realistic interpretation of what Arabization actually looks like when it gives power to moderation and gives abilities for those countries to improve in the long term. On to the second question, and therefore this issue fell to the negative. On to the second issue of what are the harms in collectivization. The affirmative team tried to bring out two key responses. They told us that collectivization was harmful, firstly because it would result in an increase in fundamentalism within Southeast Asian nations and increase the stranglehold that it was in the Middle East. But secondly, that it would create greater ethnic division in the education system, but also in the democracy. In response to this, the negative team told you, both at first and at third, that fundamentalism would not be able to fight against the moderated voice and power. We told you that there was an important part to play in the international community when you allowed regions to connect over cultural issues. We thought that was really, therefore, was enough to show why there wouldn't be an increase in fundamentalism. What do we hear in response? That the ultimate goal was that these individuals would have some sort of power. We never heard why those individuals had more power under their system and when Arabization existed. We told you why moderation would be more prevalent under these systems because there was an incentive to create that. On the second idea of whether or not greater ethnic division was created, we told you that there was a greater strength in power when you allowed this collectivization, not only within those countries, but externally. The best case scenario we heard from them was that the majority in those countries, such as Malaya, would have some sort of system. We told you that the reality was that even in those best case scenarios, you allowed some sort of power to be divided between ethnic divisions, that it wasn't exclusive for those countries, and we got told this at second and third. It was also important to note there was some sort of benefit trans borders towards economic and also political discussions in the global community that were never really engaged with effectively by the negative. It was for these reasons that we were always happy to propose. Oppose? Oppose. We all know. People don't know.
So
yardstick to adjudicate this debate is that which side of the House narrated the debate in the most accurate sense and interpreted the spirit of the motion. I think we gave enough historical lessons in today's debate. Malaysia and Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia had a great influx of different ethnic populations such as Chinese and Indians because they shared continents. It was not enough mountains and deserts that they had to overcome to mix their populations and mingle their populations. Unfortunately, those ethnicities represented their own religious identities. As opposed to that, on the flip side, Middle East, Iran and Saudi Arabia has more of a homogeneous identities with smaller and slim amount of minorities there, like Coptic Christians. We're talking about two different comparatives here, where Middle East, such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, are more homogeneous and reflecting the Quran as more of a divine saying and reflect those things more actively into the constitutions, into the laws and everyday lives, restrictions and laws in individuals. It was a different situation in Southeast Asia because there are more ethnic divisions and religious divisions. In these specific comparative, such trends like Arabization, which enforces and coerces moderate madrasas individuals into the fundamentalist, which is more similar or has more similarities with Iran and Saudi Arabia, better off or incentivized the situation in political scene in Southeast Asia or not. They defined otherwise. They said Arabization is a unification of Muslims. I don't know even if it is possible or not because Sunni and Shia will never compromise. I don't know if it is possible because those Muslim ideas are strictly differently interpreted. I don't even know whether these Indians and Chinese are going to be preached, become and converted into Muslims. I don't even know what that means by unification of Muslims. And we agree with the idea that if any other different populations or any other religious people interpret Muslims as moderate one, we want that world too. It's our model who wanted to have more madrasa schools in these Southeast Asian countries. It was us who wanted to have more popular civic culture to rationalize things not by divine saying, but a rational calculus. They said unification is a moderation. They hated the radicalization of Muslims as much as us. But who radicalizes more? It was burden of proof of negative side, even slightly, to prove that it is let's go for a model of Iran and Saudi Arabia because that's the way to go. When we substantially prove to you how it's a bad model and different model, not fitting model, not suitable model for Southeast Asians, according to specific characteristics of Southeast Asians. What have we told you? We told you in an individual level, you're getting yourselves into a more oppressive normative structure where government and parties are allowed to oppress yourself with less freedom of speech, less freedom of expression, because now laws are going to strictly going to interpret the Sharia, for example, Quran. We also told you that parties going to reflect individuals' idea as sane and claim those specific ideas, which marginalizes the other ethnicities in Southeast Asian and numerical minorities such as Indian and Chinese. Just like Bhumiputras were oppressing these Chinese and Indians, like taxi drivers don't have license, for example, Chinese drivers are never driving, it's all borrowed from Bhumiputras, right? It's going to be the same oppression when they lose in these elections. We also told you in an external political measure how these Malaysians and Indonesians going to suck into the politics of Saudi Arabia because it's going to be just satellite city, satellite nations. Because the ultimate caliphate that Iran and Saudi Arabia pursues is a better country anyway, and the role model that we have to pursue. No response whatsoever, and the end goal is the same. The yardstick that you have to adjudicate this debate is that who better characterized or who accurately reflected the concept of Arabization and the status quo and the future endgame. That's why we were very proud to take this debate. Thank you.